Hello and welcome to part 3 of my video series on how to use Blender 2.7. In this quick video, we're going to be practicing using all the things that I've covered in the last couple of videos in order to make a simple character, in this case a snowman, using primitive shapes within our scene in the 3D viewport. Let's go ahead and let's click on the splash screen to get rid of it. I'm going to quickly go to my properties panel with the N key and turn on my screencast keys. This is an add-on for Blender that lets me show you what I'm pressing on my keyboard and with my mouse, all within the 3D viewport only, unfortunately. So down here you can see what I'm pressing, but I'll be kind of talking as I do it. I'm going to go to my front orthographic view, so I'm going to press 1 to go to my front view and 5 to switch into orthographic. Remember that if you use the 1, 3, and 7 keys, and I recommend doing that, that'll bring you to and keep you within your front, right, and top views. If you press Control and 1, 3, or 7, again, this is all numbers on your number pad. In the last video, we set up Blender so that you can also use your number row if you don't have a number pad on the side of your keyboard. That's just fine. If you hold Control and press 1 or 3 or 7, it does the opposite. So Control 1 goes to the back view, Control 3 goes to the left instead of the right view, and Control 7 goes to the bottom instead of the top view. So I'm just going to press 1 and go to my front view, and I'm going to delete this default cube, so I'll press X or delete, and then select delete with that selected. Now your 3D cursor is where new objects get added. So if you've clicked to put it somewhere else other than at 0, 0, 0 in our scene, those are the coordinates at the very middle of the world, I'm going to press Shift C. And what Shift C does is two things. It puts your 3D cursor back at the middle of your scene at 0, 0, 0, and it also kind of zooms so you can see everything nicely in your scene, although I will pan over so it's more in the middle of my screen. And I'm going to add a UV sphere, which is a kind of a mesh. So the add menu and mesh, and I'll add a UV sphere. Now I don't normally go down here to the add menu. I usually just go and press Shift A. That's the keyboard shortcut for the add menu. And you can see that it's kind of reversed actually. Mesh is at the top now instead of the bottom, which I kind of like because mesh is the most common thing you're going to add while modeling. I'm going to add a UV sphere. There we go. Now when you're adding any default objects, it is important to know that, not really default objects, but when you're adding any meshes, they have a default number of faces. And these faces are divided up by edges. And really we have to be thinking about, if we're making a very complicated scene, how many faces or polygons there are on every object. As soon as you add an object, if you open up your tool shelf, which is this little plus button, if you click it, it opens up, or you can press T and that'll show or hide it. As soon as you add a mesh, and before you even move it or do anything to it, you get the options for that mesh. So this is where you can change the number of segments. So if you click and drag, you can see that we went all the way down to 3 in this case, but you can see you can simplify it. And segments are like the, and I'm going to get this wrong, and my high school teacher in socials is going to watch this and hate me for it. The lines of longitude, I hope. That's what these, if that were the Earth, that's what it would be decreasing or increasing with segments. Rings are the ones that go lines of latitude, I hope. And the size, you can adjust the size too, so that's what you can do in there. The first two things are the most important because once you move or rotate or scale this object, this section goes away. So, and there is no way to get back to it. So let's not leave it that simple. I'm going to use Shift A again and add that UV sphere again. I'm going to add, I actually remembered what it was. I'm going to do a 12 by 12 UV sphere, but I think I'm going to simplify it more for the rings to make those things more square. In fact, I'm going to go up to 12 and then try to make them as square as I can. There we go, 12 by 20 works. If you leave it at the default, I think it's 36 by 18. That's my guess. That's totally okay. Alright, so we've got a UV sphere. I'm going to pretend that this red line for my front view, which is the x-axis, or 0 on the x-axis, or 0 on the z-axis, up and down. If I move it down there, it's actually below 0 on the z-axis. But I'm going to pretend that that red line is my ground, because if I orbit around, you can see that, there is that ground right there. I'm going to duplicate my UV sphere, because we're going to make a 3 snowball snowman. Now, you can use the duplicate in your tool shelf. Remember that ever since Blender 2.70, there are now these tabs within the tool shelf. I'm not a big fan of these tabs, to tell you the truth. I would have rather just have everything still there. You can pin sections of this tool shelf, so if you right click on any of the headings, transform, edit, history, and I can pin that, and then when I go to the create tab, that transform section is still there, and I can move it around and pin it to make sort of a customized, I'm going to unpin that tool shelf. But you know what, I don't use much more than the tools here. If I want to use my grease pencil, which I haven't talked about yet in any video, or my physics, I might go there, but you know, I use keyboard shortcuts more than anything else. With this UV sphere selected, I'm going to duplicate it twice. Now I could click on the duplicate button in the tools tab, and what that'll do is it'll make a duplicate copy of that UV sphere and attach it to my mouse right away. But as you can see, my mouse is no longer really in the 3D viewport, at least not the main section. So I don't like using these buttons, especially not for, you know, rotate or translate. You know, it's not nice to have my mouse so close to the edge of the screen. So I'm just going to use Shift D, and Shift D is just as good or better for duplicate, because I can put my mouse right over it and then I can move it. Now if you grab something after pressing Shift D, so what Shift D actually does, if you press Shift D, it makes a duplicate copy of the object you have selected, and it attaches it to your mouse until you click. But if you press one of the three letters of the axes, either X, Y, or Z, in this case I'm going to press Z, it's going to constrain that object to going up and down. So what I did again is I pressed Shift D to duplicate, and then I can move it anywhere I want, side to side or up and down, but I pressed Z, and now I can only go up. Okay, I click to let go of it, and I'm going to scale with the S key. I'll move my mouse closer to the middle of that object. That's good. Shift D, and then Z. Move it up there and click. S to scale. Scale it in and click. And then I'll move it down. Great. I'm going to add some eyeballs to my snowman. So I'm going to put my 3D cursor right off to the side of the snowman, and because that's where I want to put the eye. And I'm going to add a new, again, the add menu is Shift A. I'm going to add a new UV sphere, and it's that same 20 by 12 that I customized earlier. Let's go ahead and scale that down. So I'll press S. Now when you're pressing S, you're just tapping S, by the way. You're not holding it at all, ever. So I'll make it about that big. Great. And I'm going to G to grab it and put it in on the front of the head. But you'll see that it goes into the middle of the head. That's actually not behind the head. It's in the middle of it. If I go from my top view, you can see that, you know, it was over here because my 3D cursor was exactly still lined up with the middle. This is the front of the snowman. This is the back of the snowman. So what I need to do is I need to, you know, I can move it in there, but then I want to bring it forward so it's kind of sticking out of the snowman's head, and move it right there. So now I know it's about right. If I orbit around, that's pretty well what I want. I'll move it back a little bit. Great. Back to the front view. Now I'll duplicate that eye, so I'll press Shift D, and now I only want to move it side to side, so I'm going to press X, and that will constrain it to the X axis movement only. So there we go. I'll zoom in a little bit so we can see that a little bit better. Maybe I can shift select the second one. Maybe I want to move them both up a little bit. Great. Alright, let's go to the front view again, and I'm going to add a cone. So I'll click to put my 3D cursor right there. Shift A, I'll add a cone. Now this cone is, you know, obviously too big, but if I just scale it down, if I press S and scale it down, you know, it's still too wide, or it's too tapered, or not tapered enough. I'm not sure how I would say that, but it's too big at this end, and of course it goes down to the right point. That's about the length that I want it to be, and it has one circle on the bottom, but what I want it to be is more like a carrot shape, or at least, you know, not quite so wide at the bottom. The way to do this is not just to grab your scale gizmo and then scale it like that, because then it's just squished. The way that I recommend scaling things is, you know, I want to make the, and this is true for cylinders and cones, I want to make that circle the right size first. I don't care how tall it is, because it's going to be very easy for me to scale the cone up and down, but I'm going to press S and then move my mouse to make that circle the right size. So right about there, that's the size of the base that I want. And now I can use my scale gizmo and drag up on that cone just to make it taller. Notice how I didn't rotate it ahead of time, because that would distort potentially this. Yeah, you can see it got stretched a little bit. This bottom is now an oval. So before you rotate or do anything like that, you'll want to scale it uniformly to make the circle the right size and then pull it up. By the way, you can press, if I had pressed S to scale this to the cone to make the circle the right size, and I didn't want to be using my gizmo, I can press S and then just press Z, and that'll only let me scale it on the Z axis to make it the right size. And if you're as nutty about keyboard shortcuts as I am, you can even, I'm going to undo a few times, you can press S to scale, but if you want to scale on the X and Y axes and just not the Z axis, you can press S and then Shift Z. And what that'll do is it'll allow you to scale on the X and Y. Basically, Shift Z means negate Z, or don't scale on the Z, but scale on the other two axes. So again, that was S and then Shift Z, and that'll only scale on the X and Y axes. So I'll do that, and that's just as quick. If you're more comfortable using the S key and then just the scale gizmo, that's totally fine by me. I'm going to press 3 to go to my side view. Maybe I'll scale that up a little bit longer. Maybe press S and Z and scale it to make this a little bit shorter. I'm going to press R to rotate my cone to be pointing forward, although I'm going to rotate it exactly to be pointing to the front of the snowman. So I'm going to press R, and then I'll type -90 and then press enter. When you type R, you can then type a number of degrees. In this case, I want to rotate 90 degrees to the left, which is -90. So I typed R -90, and then I pressed enter. Let's go ahead and I'll move the cone to right about there. I'll go to the front view again. Remember that when you're positioning things in 3D space, you have to look at it from at least 2 angles, usually the front and the side, or the front and the top, or whatever makes sense. Now, I don't quite like how pointy this nose is. I want the base to be a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it on the Z and X axes, and I don't care how, how I'm scaling it on the, or I don't want to scale it at all actually, on the Y axis now, because I don't want to make it longer, I just want to make it wider. So I'm going to press S and then Shift Y. So now I'm not scaling it on the Y, I'm only scaling it on the Z and X axes, and there we go, looks pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and I'm going to add a mesh. We're going to add a icosphere. Icosphere is more like, kind of like a soccer ball, although a soccer ball is made up of what is it, hexagons or pentagons, I can't remember right now, but it's a different way of making a sphere. Instead of having squares or rectangles, you have triangles. I'm going to scale that down. This is going to be the little pieces of coal for the mouth. So I'll scale it down. I'm going to go to my side view, or right view, put that right about there for the mouth. I'll grab it with the G key, and I'm going to do some duplicating, Shift D. Whoops. By the way, if you ever, I press or Shift F there, if you ever get into some sort of mode that you don't know how to get out of it, or you press P and you don't know what's going on, you can always press Escape, and Escape will get you out of any kind of weird mode that you're in. Let's go ahead and grab this. Okay, maybe I'll move it over there. Shift D. Shift D. Oops. Shift D. I keep pressing Shift F by accident. That's what I get when I switch between different keyboards on different computers. Alright, I don't like how far some of these are sticking out, so I'm going to move these in a little bit. I'll grab those two with the Shift key and move them in with my gizmo. Great, looks pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and add a top hat. So I'm going to click my 3D cursor above the head. I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to add a cylinder. And now I want the cylinder to be like the brim of the hat, this top hat. So before we do that though, I'm actually going to increase the number of vertices around that cylinder. Again, this is in my tool shelf, and I can only do this before I move or rotate or scale that cylinder. I'm going to scale this on the Z axis, so I'll press S then Z, or I could just use my gizmo maybe I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than that, maybe a little bit smaller than that, and I'll squish it down to make it a little bit flatter. Great, I'm going to move this down. We're going to add another cylinder. I'll scale it to be about the right width. I'll move it up, and that's about the right height actually. So I'm going to select both of those things, move it down a little bit. Now my snowman has a top hat. Good, same thing with the arms. We're going to make one arm though, and we're going to duplicate it. So I'm going to add a cylinder. We'll scale it down. Again, I want the circles to be the right size. I don't care how tall it is, because I want to get the circles the right size first before I rotate or do anything like that. And then I'll scale it. I can use my gizmo and drag up, or I can just press S, and then I only want to scale on the Z axis, and I can pull my mouse away from the middle of that object to make it longer. Great. Now I could rotate it, but before I do that, I'm going to make some fingers. So I'm going to Shift D to duplicate that cylinder, and then I'll drag this down to make it much shorter for the fingers. I'll grab that with the G key, rotate with the R key. So I hope what you're getting here is practice, and if you follow along or you make a snowman after me, practice doing these things and getting comfortable with selecting and moving and rotating and using your gizmo, using the fact that you can press the X, Y, or Z buttons after you press, R to rotate, or even G to grab, or S to scale. Getting comfortable navigating in the 3D viewport and using your hotkeys like Shift A and R and S and G. And to shift click to select multiple things. Now the last kind of thing I'm going to show you, or last keyboard shortcut that's new in this video, is if I want to select a bunch of things at once, I can select one thing and then hold Shift and select the additional things afterwards. But there is a faster way. If I press B on my keyboard, B as in box, that's the box select mode, or that's how you get into box select mode. So if I press B, you can see these lines coming off of my mouse cursor. If I now click and drag around objects, that's how I can make a selection box that I can select whole groups of things together. Just be careful though that you're not selecting extra things. You can see how I accidentally selected the head and the body there. By the way, the A key selects everything or deselects everything. It kind of toggles between. So if you want to make sure that nothing is selected, you can press A and A a few times until you see there's no orange or red outlines, and now I can press B and box select. I'll now press R to rotate the arm. I'll put it right about there, make sure it looks good from my side view and front view, and I'll duplicate my whole selected 4-piece arm with Shift D. Now I could rotate it, but what I'll do instead is I'm going to mirror this arm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Object, Mirror, and X Global, and what this will do is it'll flip it or mirror it on the X axis in our whole global world. So I'm not sure that this is going to work, but nope. You know what? It's not. We're not going to touch upon that in this video though. Why that didn't work, I will explain it later, but not for now. Let's go ahead and let's press R to rotate, and then I'll put this right there. What else should we add just for flourish? Let's go ahead and add another set of icospheres. I'll scale it down with the S key. I'm going to grab that, put that right there, go to my side view, go there, put it there, duplicate it. Whoops, that's Shift F, don't do that. That's a bad habit that I've just started doing. Alright, so I've got my 3 buttons, I got my snowman. There it is, orbiting around. That'll be it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.